assume that was Gabe. Thank you, Gabe.
Awesome. Who knows the date? Okay. September 15th, 2021. Plan weekly meeting. Martin has the first one, but he asked me to vocalize it because he can't make the call. So I'll go ahead. Yeah, so he's in 14.4. He's going to be handing over manage, optimize, and workspace duties to another technical writer. So he'll have more capacity for non-feature work in plan docs. So that's just an update from him. Gabe, you have the next one.
Oh, hey, yeah. So I was just going to verbalize that I had a call with one of our largest customers, if not the largest customer, that is also planning on moving from Jira Self-Managed to GitLab. I was just going to touch on a couple different things from the conversation, just passing along. In terms of things they're most interested in is flowing work across hierarchies. I think, like how do you assign an issue from one sibling to an epic and another, that sort of problem. They're keen on workflows and more so for their business process teams than their developer teams. Like they want to move everyone, not just the software developers, into GitLab, which means that like for some of their business processes, that's where they wanted a little bit more control over like enforced workflows, which is something I'll dig into with them and see if there's any way that we can leverage some of the stuff that compliance is doing for that enforcement while keeping everything within plan lightweight. And then I also talked through with them work items. They were super stoked about that. So that was some good validation. And then the other thing was a more robust Jira importer. And so they actually wanted us to completely hide the Jira integration or disable it for their instance, because they don't want people to stay on Jira. They want them all to move to GitLab. But one of the things that they would like is they said just a big blue button that just moves everything over, all of their existing data, right, to GitLab. So I said, yeah, here's where we're at. We can maybe work on the button part of it. But I think it was just generally good validation that we're on the right track. I also wanted to highlight that I review with them our list on a direction page of things we're not doing. And for those of you that aren't familiar with that, I'm going to drop in a link right here. And because they were asking about like those super complex, what we're not, enforced workflows and things like that. And so I just basically said, hey, here, as of right now, it's not that we'll never do this, but we're not going to do it right now. It's not on a roadmap. It's not in the near term. So if this is like one of the things that you're dependent on to move over to GitLab, it's not going to happen in the next 3 years, probably. It was like, that could change, but yeah, it was good to also tell them no to some things. And I think that was good for them because they sort of are okay with that as long as we give them an alternative that works just as well to solving their business needs, if that makes sense. And they are also really interested in custom fields was the other one. But they said that they didn't want us to build it unless we could do it at performance at scale, because they were running into like a ton of problems with that in Jira, where they have like 3,000 or something custom fields and they have to re-index it every like 12 hours. And it's like a nightmare. So just passing that along. It was good. It was a good conversation though. They were positive. I think next year they're planning on next year putting together an official program to transition all of their 12,000, 18,000 users to GitLab for playing.
Maybe we can have the easy button ready for next year.
It's a good validation about the custom field scale, though, like a good kind of reminder that we can maybe be a bit more opinionated about, how widely you can scale that. Because if they're having problems with it now, like it kind of validates that we should put some sane limits in place, I guess.
Oh yeah, that's what I told them.
I'm on here next. So I just wanted to make the team aware. I'm doing an opportunity canvas around saved queries and views, which is a new proposed category that we have talked about with Melissa for plan. And so basically the idea would be to consolidate our query and the filtering process around GitLab, because we have so many, well, even within plan, we have 5 different ways we're doing the filter bar. So I have a really consistent way of doing it, breaking down it even further so that we have the concept of views beneath the query. I'll just share my screen here with Whimsical, and this is not necessarily how we will implement. This is to help demonstrate kind of up the chain, kind of how it could be, or how we could get more clear about how queries run within GitLab and within Plan specifically. So in this example, the main query would have been that I want to look at issues and features, label group product planning, milestone 14.3. Right now, we just use list view, or we use this view like in boards or other areas around GitLab, but the ability to save that, give it the name product planning current release, and then switch the views. We could have a switch that adds an additional filter of in dev. We could switch to look at the current board view of that release, switch it to a burn down roadmap, and there's lots of other. We could have this opened up to value stream or any other charts or graphs or views that the teams would want to add, or we could build or contribute to the ecosystem. So just kind of putting that on there so everyone can read through if you want to look at the WIP opportunity canvas. That's happening tomorrow with Scott, and then hopefully that will just help get some buy-in for either more resources on the team and helping them understand our roadmap, that within a year or so is when we could start working on this with all the work on our plate. So we want to keep showing the new ideas that we have and the resources we'll need to do them.
Excellent. Yeah, I just had the third item on here. Controllant recently upgraded from Premium to Ultimate. Mainly after talking to them, they're impressed with our requirements management vision. They like where the concept is going. They believe that's something they're going to use in the next year and a half, and they want to be there on the ground floor to get used to it. And they also really like the project planning, just the project management capabilities, burn down charts, milestones. It all resonated with them very well. And they believe in what we're doing. So it's a small customer, but it's again something that shows that we're moving in the right direction. So I thought that was real positive.
Cool.
John, your next point is no
Thank you.
verbal, but the following point is still you verbal.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, just a reminder that I'm still looking for issues suitable for new contributors for the upcoming hackathon. So please label any you see as such or add them to the issue I've created. Yeah, that bucket currently includes issues like the one I've linked there. These are prioritized. Actually, that one's prioritized for 14.3. So imminent, but it's a wait one. And if a community contributor picked it up, we'd of course be happy for them to do that as well. But if you do pick up an issue like that's scheduled anyway, yeah, just maybe remove that label so it's not confusing for new contributors. I don't know whether to go down this, but basically anything that's a wait 1 or a wait 2, or the description is particularly, like it's particularly obvious, or a solution is already present in the discussion, something like that. These are all ideal for first-time contributors, and we want to grow the number of first-time contributors to plan. And it's a free market, so the more like refined our issues are, the more chance we have of grabbing some of that share during the hackathon. I don't know, Martin's not here, but he just mentioned that he'd added some documentation issues as well. Yeah, they're also ideal. Any questions? Otherwise, Kristen, you can take over.
No questions from me. Just note that I've heard from just a few people as well that everyone would love to see more from the designers, and that we would give them a specific spot in the agenda, because often they're below the fold and then we don't get back to them, or we say we'll take it async. So let's just be aware of that, especially on days where we have new designs coming in, or there needs to be collaboration between the team to give feedback. that we prioritize it.
When you say group meeting, this is the meeting you're talking about, right?
Yes, sorry, stage.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's pretty interesting because I'm just looking through the our past agendas, and the times when we have design team previews are, for some reason, the times where we actually have stuff in 1 and 2 and team updates and big picture updates. So I don't know if we really need to change anything, because more often than not, we should have time to get to 3. But I agree, just being aware that maybe we get through the other stuff a little bit quicker when there is stuff, so we can get to everything, especially number 3.
Agreed.
Okay, cool. And then I just put a note in there that I love to bring back engineering demos. We haven't done any of those for a bit. And that would fall under number 4 anyway, so we'd go after design team previews. But yeah, that'd be another nice thing to bring back.
I could just show y'all really fast what I'm looking at on my screen. It's not super relevant, but it's just kind of interesting. I just put a note in the design team preview, but I'm trying to give feedback to another designer about the applications, like creating new applications. In our flow right now, this is me trying to sketch something really fast to co-work. It's strange, like we don't have a new application review kind of area. It's just a list. So it almost seems like they need like an application page, like a new application page that they can go and edit and copy and review. So that did just make me think like, oh no, there's going to be so many items that are like almost look like issue pages or issues in the future. We already have also like vulnerabilities that you can create issues from. I was looking at that yesterday as well. So just something to keep in mind as we work on kind of the model of creating and editing work items. Like we can apply that to other areas in GitLab in the future as well. Very interesting, I know. Has anyone looked at that application page in admin tools? Nope. Okay. Anyway, someone else can take it ahead. And just, yeah, this is just FYI, it's kind of fun. In product design, one of our like top priorities is helping out other designers. So this is how I try to do it quickly. I just kind of sketch things and they always kind of look ugly, but I don't care. So just so you know, that is part of my day. I guess we're on workflow, right? Maybe John.
Yeah, I can take it. Thanks, Alexis. Yeah, another one from Martin first. So the guidelines for documenting feature flags has been updated. I think that was like a month ago, but it's pretty detailed docs now, like, so it's worth checking out. And then, yeah, like, so this next one I just kind of threw in last minute, but I thought it might be interesting, so I can share screen here. So we often say that we like deprioritize a category, but as an engineer manager, like I'm interested in knowing how well we stick to that. So this came out of the last retrospective. One of the follow-up actions was to try and figure out, like, are we really deprioritizing, like in practice? So I think the chart that's interesting to me anyway is this bottom one. This is the capacity spend on internal team members spend on features that we have deprioritized. So you can see that like the totals don't really add up, and that's because we don't add the category label to MRs as a matter of course. It's not mandatory, but you could assume, I guess, that it's uniformly not applied and that the proportions are roughly correct. So you can see that in August 2021, MRs from the team against deprioritized categories were 4, MRs to prioritized categories were 10. So you're talking roughly 30% of our capacity went on deprioritized features. Actually, for some reason, I have both teams with the front and back end team of product planning, but you can scope it down by whatever team you want. So that's interesting, like, because the only two deprioritized categories I have in this chart at the minute are design management and service desk. So for everything the product planning front and back end teams do, we do about 30% in those categories. And if you add up the remaining categories, like that's about the proportion you would expect if we hadn't deprioritized these two categories, right? So it's a little interesting to know that, I mean, you could say that since we're not prioritizing the work, this really is like critical bugs, high impact security issues, critical tech debt, things like that that we can't actually avoid doing. We still end up spending a significant amount of time in these categories. Some of the other charts are to do with community contributions. So this first chart is the number of reviews that team members do against community contributions versus contributions by internal team members. And this one is time spent reviewing MRs to deprioritize features. So you can have a look at these charts if you're interested. There's a couple of improvements need to be made. Like one thing would be to go through and make sure everything that we've done in the last 6 months is categorized by label. As I said, we don't really make that mandatory. In fact, we don't make it mandatory for issues either. It is in practice what we do. We add a category label to all issues, but we don't necessarily do it with MRs. We might get a better idea then. So Gabe, yeah, you had a point underneath. You want to verbalize it?
Yeah, I was just curious if you had examples of the nature of the MRs from deprioritized categories, because like once you build something, you still have to maintain it. It's like it never goes away. So I'd be curious about that. Was my first point, and then my second was I think deprioritized categories first and foremost are meant to be an external signal that we're not actively investing a ton of capacity towards moving something forward. Because a lot of times when we're talking to customers or sales is talking to customers or TAMs are like, okay, well, if it's a signal to them that we're not actually moving it forward so that they can set expectations with their customers. So I think that's one thing. And then I did notice that you had the two charts, one for community contributions versus our own team, which sort of answers my second point. And I think it's still important to support the wider community pushing it forward, like deprioritize things. And I was just going to give the example lead ticket. I've been collaborating with them a little bit. I'm working on a CRMS feature where you can actually have organizations and then contacts within organizations, then that can be eventually linked to like an issue, right? So then you could do invoicing and things like that, which I think it's super awesome and strategically aligned with their much longer term vision. But I wouldn't prioritize that for a long time, right? But if he wants to do it, I think that's amazing, and I think we should support him. So there's like a lot of factors, I guess, is TLDR.
Exactly. So yeah, it is amazing. We have a couple of very motivated community contributors, and the truth is, like, if we quote unquote deprioritize a category, but we have a highly motivated contributor who wants to push some ideas forward for that category, then we have to put capacity around that, both your capacity as a PM and our capacity as a team to review and to help steer the MRs. And so it's not like making a judgment one way or the other. Like, to have a chart like this is purely informational. I think it's just to give us an indication of like what we want to do versus what we're doing in practice. And maybe it helps us make better engineering decisions as well, like about capacity, because, you know, if we're going through a period where we're spending a lot of time reviewing and not so much shipping MRs towards features, you know what I mean? Like, if the amount of reviews we have to do is larger because we have highly motivated community contributions, that's great, but it is also going to impact the amount of work that we can plan to do ourselves. And so we need to take that into account, and we need it to be visible somewhere, I think. So this is first attempt, like, to actually make that visible. Sorry, also just sorry.
Can we somehow get the amount that Alexis has to jump in on all of these MRs? Is there a label we could use to have a chart for that as well? Because her time is really taken up where she doesn't have as much time to do forward-looking design because she's goaltending.
I wonder, Alexis, would it help to, would the UX label cover that? Like, do you review, it would help me basically to know more about your workflow. So like, do you review every MR with a UX label?
Yeah, I think ideally I should, right? Like some designers don't. I don't know if y'all saw what I posted from Pedro the other day. That might be interesting. So designers kind of do different workflows, but yeah, me, I like to. It's UI changes, backend changes, almost anything I think is helpful because it could need review. So yes, UX and reviewer Alexis.
Yeah, we might be able to use some existing filters then to build some extra charts around that. I think another chart that would be interesting would be like, there's a time estimation in Snowflake for each MR. I guess it's just based on when the MR was open versus when it was merged. Could be interesting to sum those for community and non-community, wider community MRs. And then to Gabe's point as well, we should be able to just build a table of linking through to MRs that were for deprioritized categories, so we could see like what they are. But I would say that they're probably, like I said, high priority, security, technical debt, bugs, and so on, or application limits, things that we're working on for reliability, things like that. All things that we wouldn't necessarily choose to schedule, but it's good to be aware that we're having to do them anyway.
Would we track ourselves too? Like, does this include our team or just community contributors?
Yeah, the orange stacked bars, the orange parts are internal team members and the blue parts are wider community contributions.
Thank you. And I guess like, we don't want to, I mean, I'm assuming, but we don't want to focus our internal time on deprioritized categories as well, right? I would assume. Like engineering effort.
I mean, like Gabe mentioned, that it's really about communicating to customers that they're deprioritized. If a critical security issue comes up, like we have to fix it. It doesn't matter the category. Same for reliability issues. Like if there's an attack vector using service desk, for example, we have to close that. We can't say it's deprioritized because it affects the wider application, you know, so it may be things like that. But mostly I was interested in, I got the impression that we were spending a lot of time reviewing MRs towards these categories and a lot of time on these like urgent fixes that we couldn't get out of. We have to do them. And I really wanted to know, like, what's the truth of it, right? Like, is that just my impression or is it true? And you can see from like the chart around like capacity spent reviewing MRs to deprioritize features, it's not really true at all. You know, we don't spend an inordinate amount of time on wider contributions reviewing those MRs. Like it's a small percentage. But actually, if you look at the chart that's to do with MRs to deprioritize features from inside the team, like it's quite substantial.
Yeah, I'll verbalize my point. Thanks, John, for this analysis. It's super helpful to see how we're spending time. And yeah, it would be interesting, just like Gabe said, of digging in on these MRs, right? Like if there really are just kind of like the cost of having a category, that's also good to know. And it would be good to kind of socialize that within the PM org, right? That it's like basically having stuff is not free, right? You have to account for some capacity to just sort of keep the lights on. And of course, as we dig into these MRs and what they are, let us know what we can do on the PM side to help kind of focus the team on the right priorities.
Sure thing.
Just curious, this graph shows the entire GitLab. It's not plan, right? Only contribution.
It's got a team filter on the top left, so you can use that to filter down by team. The only thing I would say is like the only one that's really helpful for at the minute is the top chart. If you filter by other teams, The only recognized deprioritized categories currently are service desk and design management, so it's meaningless currently for other teams. I'm going to put those into a single source of truth filter, and then I'll ask other EMs to add their deprioritized categories to it so we can get an overall view.
Yeah,
I was
and
a little
like
confused too.
wondering.
The
I'm
filters
sorry, go
don't
ahead.
apply. No, the same thing happened to me when you click the link, the filters aren't applied. So I think it is all of GitLab.
In that case, you probably only the top chart is relevant. You want to add,
Yeah.
when you add filters, unless you pick product planning, because we only have product planning's categories in there at the minute. But I'll do some work on that today, probably,
Okay.
like to add all the categories from other groups and stuff. If you remove all filters, like the top chart's still relevant. If you filter by any team, top chart is still relevant, but only filtering by product planning, the bottom two charts are accurate.
I would be curious to see these contributions for deprioritizing comparison to like overall work. Then you can then say like this is actually 1%, or it is like 70% of the time spent on overall versus just deprioritize, right?
Yeah, it'd be interesting. Well, we have to get all those categories. Like, I'm not sure who the best person to go for to find that information out is. Like, could be PMs of other teams.
Is there an unlabeled category too, or like a triage bot we could do that would just check in if an MR doesn't have a product category to remind them for hygiene of the labels?
You see, we don't actually encourage people to add category at all to MRs. I think Donald made the point before that, like, if it's there at all, it's probably imported when the user clicks create an MR within an issue, and then it's copied over from the issue. But like a single issue towards a category could have 3 MRs, or more. And some may have the label, some not. So like, it's probably easy enough to go through. Like, as a team, we ship like, as a backend team, like maximum 60 MRs a month on average. Like, I'd like to think we do that, but so to go for 6 months, 360 MRs, remove the ones that already have the label. It's not a huge amount of work to go through and add the category label to the remainder.
Okay.
Melissa, you already got a chance to make your point there about, like, is there something we can do to help focus less on these?
I think it depends on what they are, right? I think that's the next step. If we look through and it's all security performance things, and it's kind of like that's the cost of having the category. But if it's new features or things like that, right, that's where it would get interesting of, is there a communication breakdown, or like what's happening?
Yeah, or like, I mean, even if you say they're deprioritized, but you prioritize, say, like one small tiny addition, like maybe it's helpful to know that you're adding that tiny addition to already like 20% of capacity spent on security and so on. Like, and so you may choose not to do that, or you may choose to do it. Like, you may decide it's fine. I think the next step is to get that list of MRs that are going out, and then we can have a look at like their labels and why they were done. Cool. Thank you. Gabe, you have the next one.
I guess we're going to social time. Curious how everyone's doing, honestly. I will say for me personally, it's been a challenging few months, just because all the stuff going on, headcount resets, rapid actions, reliability problems, incidents. I mean, it's just, and it's probably even more so for the engineers. And so I'm curious how everyone's doing, and also if there's any specific feelings or thoughts around this like localized feature change lock policy that recently got implemented. So I will stop recording too.